Hi, I'm Brett Johnson, former United States most wanted cyber criminal, now good guy, and host of the Brett Johnson Show on YouTube. Today's episode number 45, Ilya Lichtenstein, 191,000 stolen bitcoins, the United States Secret Service, and the truth when we come back. All right, so we're back to the Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode number 45. Ilya Lichtenstein, 191,000 stolen bitcoins, the United States Secret Service, and the truth. Now, hey, usually we start out this show with viewer comments, and we're not really going to do that this time. The only viewer comment that I would like to address is from Mary Patterson. And Mary, she comments on my show frequently. Every single comment that Mary makes is outstanding. I have no idea who you are, Mary, but thank you so much for making those comments. I do appreciate it. The one comment that I'd like to talk about today that's in relation to this show, Mary asked if I was ever worried or felt threatened or in danger because of what I do. I call out criminals. I call out corporations, law enforcement. If something needs to be said, I've made a name of being the guy that says the shit that needs to be said, and today is absolutely no different. And Mary, to answer your question, think of this show as your show today. I have felt a high degree of stress, anxiety, depression because of today's topic, Ilya Lichtenstein and the Bitfinex breach, and then Ilya being charged, and the information that I have today. I felt a large degree of stress, anxiety, depression, everything else because of that. And I've been worried. And honestly, over the past just 3 days, I've been asked that question. Do I feel safe? Are you in danger? I've been asked by attorneys, by directors, by journalists, by directors of marketing, by friends, by family, more in the past 3 days than I probably have in the previous 6 years. And it's not a question that's not, it's been asked to me before. Do I feel safe? And my answer to that is, I don't know if I'm smart enough to worry about it. My primary focus, my goal, my motivation, a lot of people think that my motivation is cash, that I'm just wanting money. No, I don't give a damn about money. My primary singular focus, my motivation is in the tagline of my show that I end with every single episode. Just do the right damn thing. I spent years not doing that, doing the wrong thing. And then I was, through choice and through being forced, I became this good guy. And I'm really just now starting to understand, when I say it at the beginning of the show, former most wanted cyber criminal, now good guy, I started that not really believing I was a good guy. But I'm only now starting to understand, yeah, by God, I am a good guy. I was forced to be this way, and I'm going to show you that, my goal is to show people what that looks like. I talk all the time, hey, we need people that aren't afraid to say what needs to be said. A lot of the times people are scared to talk, call out a company, call out an individual because they're scared of losing a job, losing a contract, a client, a friend, angering someone. We've got to be willing to call out the things that need to be said. How can we need trust. We need people on this planet that work to help each other. I spent most of my life not doing that, and I'm adamant about doing that now. How can you trust someone if they're not willing to tell the truth against something when something matters to them? How can we trust them to tell the truth on something that doesn't matter? So we need to get to the point where we are saying the things that need to be said. That's my singular motivation. Am I in danger? I don't think so. Now, this story may have some Russian organized crime elements. I don't know. It's probably going to upset some law enforcement. I would be surprised if it doesn't. But I'm that guy that calls out what needs to be said. And I don't, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters to me is the truth. So I'm going to tell the damn truth, regardless. Now, there's some icing on the cake to this story. I just got off the phone a few minutes ago with a Forbes reporter. As a matter of fact, Forbes is recording me filming my show. So, and it happened all within the space of just a few hours. I got on the phone with a Forbes reporter, told them what I had. They were like, well, we're doing a documentary on Ilya. Let's connect you with the director. 8 minutes into telling the director what I'm talking about on this show, she gets this weird smile on her face. And she's like, I've been saying that, and everyone's calling me a conspiracy theorist. And I'm like, hey, I've got the document that says that you're not. Then they decided they're going to film the show. So I'm very fortunate. I'm chief criminal officer of Arcos Labs, and it's this steady progression. I was a criminal, and I've spent the many years establishing trust in the cybersecurity industry. And I'm well respected. I'm spokesperson for AARP. I speak across the planet. I consult. I work hard every day to protect businesses and consumers from the type of person that I used to be, until finally Kevin Goschalk. I even speak at Quantico, for God's sakes. But Kevin Goschalk, the CEO and founder of Arcos, an outstanding security company, he was like, why don't we create a new C-level position called Chief Criminal Officer? So he brings me on. I'm very blessed for that. I am, and I've established this trust. And the information that I've got today, if I were talking about this 4 or 5 years ago, no one would have listened. No one would have listened. It would have been like, an episode of Ripley's Believe It or Not in cybersecurity, some interesting footnote. But I'm listened to these days, and I'm trusted in the industry. And the things that I have to talk about today, while are not comfortable to me, some of it is, but some of it's not. But it needs to be said. So that's what I'm talking about. Now, before we get into a lot of this story, please understand that my listeners, the regular viewers, my background. I get the voices, I do the theatrics and all this other stuff. A lot of people who are going to be listening to this show, because of what I'm talking about, they may not know my background. So please forgive me as I talk about some of my bio, because it absolutely pertains to this episode. All right. So I began my life of crime. The United States Secret Service, they referred to me as the original internet godfather. And the way I get the title is 39 felonies, being placed on the United States Most Wanted list. I escaped from prison, and I built and ran the first organized cybercrime community. It was called Shadow Crew. It was a precursor of today's darknet and darknet markets. It laid the foundation for the way modern cybercrime channels operate today. Those 39 felonies had to do with refining modern financial cybercrime. You could actually kind of refer to me not only as the original internet godfather, but also pretty much the father of modern cybercrime as we now know it. Matter of fact, a guy on LinkedIn just the other day said they need to call you Rome, because all roads lead through Brett Johnson. And there's some truth to that. Most every major cybercrime story has some connection to me. I know these guys. And this story with the Bitfinex stuff, Ilya Lichtenstein, guess what? Yeah, it's still got a connection to Brett Johnson. Not anything to be proud of, just the truth. So I started my life of crime at 10 years old. I'm from Eastern Kentucky. My mom was a fraudster. She was also is also a very abusive parent and person overall. My life of crime begins at 10 years old. Me and my sister shoplift food to feed ourselves. I shoplift food to feed my sister. Then we start stealing clothes and toys because we're 10. My sister Denise is 9. Mom comes home and sees the stuff that we've stolen, asks where it came from. I lie about it. We found it. Denise is like, we stole it. My mom looks at my sister, show me how you did that. And she starts running us as little shoplifters. That's how I begin my life of crime. Here's the thing. I'm not saying that my upbringing resulted in me being a criminal. I chose, when I became an adult, to be a crook. I chose to victimize people. My sister, other than that one experience, she goes off to be a good teacher, a great parent, just a good citizen. Now, she has issues. Make no mistake about that. No one can walk away from that environment that we grew up in and not have some sort of familial PTSD. So she has issues, but she doesn't break the law anymore. I'm the guy that continued to go with it. And not only my mom, but that entire side of the family, they were all criminals. I grew up knowing how to traffic drugs, breaking and entering, faking accidents, burning homes for cash. I mean, any number of things, stealing coal illegally, any number of things, until I branched off on my own, went into cybercrime, and ultimately became this godfather by starting these there's three fundamental websites of the start of online or modern financial cybercrime: Counterfeit Library, Shadow Crew, and then Carter Planet. I was the head of both Counterfeit Library and Shadow Crew. I'm the person who's responsible for establishing the trust mechanism that criminals still use today. So yeah, I am the original internet godfather, and I am pretty much this father of modern cybercrime, just the way it is. Shadow Crew goes on to make the front cover of Forbes August 2004. Headline: Who's Stealing Your Identity? October 26, 2004, the United States Secret Service arrests 33 people, 6 countries, 6 hours. I'm the only guy publicly mentioned as getting away. They pick me up 4 months later, and they give me a job. The Secret Service does. So we're going to stop there. I'm going to go back a little bit, talk about my marital history and the relationship history, because my motivations, I get the worst parts from my mom and my dad. My mom, I get the criminal mindset. My father, he was always scared of the people that he loved leaving. So I get that aspect too. You mix them both together, you get Brett Johnson. Still learning today what it is that is a healthy relationship, what happiness is, what love is. I'm still trying to learn that today. And I have a lot of issues. I do. I married my first wife, Susan. I was married to her for 9 years, and I lied to her every single day of those 9 years. The first 3 years were me saying, well, it took her 3 years to find out what I did for a living. The next 6 years were me saying, I've stopped, I will stop, I'm going to stop just a little while longer, until finally it became me looking at her in the eyes and saying, hey, you like spending the money, don't you? She leaves me. And I get depressed. That fear I have of being abandoned became real. I caused it, still real. Got depressed, got suicidal, reached out to a psychologist. Saw her for 4 months. She's trying to get me to stop breaking the law and go into real estate. And I'm like, is there a difference? But she did some good. And the problem was I was 34. I didn't start drinking alcohol until I was 34. I was always that clean-cut cyber criminal. The thing is that one night I got lonely, and this absolutely pertains to this story about Ilya. What happens is I get lonely one day, and I get horny. I had never been to a strip club in my life, and I walked into a strip club, and I'm literally that guy who falls in love with the first stripper that he sees. She walks by, I'm like, ha, girl for me. I want you to understand, I loved that girl. I loved that woman, and she loved me. All right, but I moved her in with me. When I moved her in with me, found out she was addicted to cocaine. Not only was she addicted to cocaine, but she was prostituting herself to support her habit. Now, she gave all that up, moved away from that, everything else. And by the time I get arrested, she didn't know I was a criminal either. I lied to everybody that was important to me. By the time I get arrested, she's overcoming those demons, working through that, everything else. And I was arrested 3 weeks. I was arrested 3 weeks before I was supposed to be married to her. I intended to spend my life with this woman, and it all fell apart. And part of why it fell apart has to do with today's episode. All right. So bear that in mind. During that relationship phase of mine, Shadow Crew makes the cover of Forbes, gets popped. Secret Service arrests me 4 months later. Actually, the FBI arrests me. Secret Service comes in within 45 minutes, takes over the investigation, and they give me a job. Now, that basis of everything being established right there, I want to say that I pled guilty to my charges. I did not take my case to trial. If I had, they would have given me probably 20 years in prison. So I took the plea agreement. That was a smart thing to do. That way my range was somewhere between 60 to 75 months in prison. I took the plea. They gave me 75 months. I escaped. They gave me even more time when they caught me after my prison escape. I took the plea agreement. Part of my plea agreement said that for life, I could not do any FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act. So every citizen in the United States, they can petition the government for any type of information. Do you have this information? Let me get what you've got on it. Now, some things may be redacted, but they will deliver those files to you. I've got a lifetime ban on any FOIA request. I cannot do anything with FOIA at all. Now, when that was on my plea agreement, I was more than willing to sign that. I was like, shit, don't care. As long as you don't give me 20 years, I'll sign anything you want me to sign. But I've always wondered why. Why am I not allowed a FOIA request? That doesn't make any sense. Hell, I'm kind of a UFO nut sometimes. I know all about Roswell. I did a damn paper on it back in college. So maybe one day I'd like to, see what you've got on that kind of crap. But I'm not allowed to do that. And I've always wondered why. And today is one of the answers as to why. Because it turns out that some of the documents that I might request, only I would maybe know what those documents meant and the implications of those documents. And again, it has to do with today's show. I know I'm building up to it. I'm going to get to it. Let me tell you guys a story. Let me tell you a story. Let me open up to Google. Got to open up to Google for this. So we're 2016, Bitfinex, and I'm going to have the links to the wikis and everything else so you guys can look at all this. But 2016, in August 2016, the Bitfinex cryptocurrency exchange based in Hong Kong announced it had suffered a security breach. Around 2,000 approved transactions were sent to a single wallet from users' segregated wallets. Immediately thereafter, Bitcoin's trading price plunged by 20%, causing the value of the stolen Bitcoin to dip to 58 million. So when 191,000 Bitcoins were stolen from Bitfinex, they were valued at $70 million. Because of that theft, the value of Bitcoin dropped overnight by 20%, valued at $58 million. After learning of the breach, Bitfinex halted all Bitcoin withdrawals and trading and said it was tracking down the hack. So it was compromised account details that resulted in that. Somebody had compromised it and they were milking the money out. They were just sending the money out. So one of the things about cryptocurrency is account security. You got to be really careful. If you've not read the news lately, a lot of crypto tokens, oh my, you talk about the scams. Turns out that the blockchain itself, pretty damn secure. As long as you've not got some idiot that's developing it, the blockchain is extremely secure. What's not secure are the humans that are using it, are the social media accounts that are attached to it, are all these different avenues that can be used to scam or take over crypto accounts. And Bitfinex, absolutely no different in that matter. 191,000 tokens stolen. So that is the first story. Bitfinex, the 2016 compromise. Let me tell you another story. This other story is of Ilya Lichtenstein. Again, reading from his wiki. Ilya Lichtenstein, age 34, is an American businessman, investor, web developer, technology entrepreneur. He owns a number of enterprises. According to his accounts, Ilya and his spouse, Heather Morgan, became famous after they were jailed on February 8th, 2022 for a $4.5 billion crypto scam. According to reports, they accomplished this cryptocurrency laundering during the 2016 Bitfinex breach. And I'm going to share my screen so we can actually look at the page while I'm talking. So he's a longtime investor in a startup called Demand Path since 2019. Aside from that, he worked as an advisor at SalesFolk. Early life, according to media reports, well known in the nation for his investments in commercial ventures. According to LinkedIn, has been a mentor at 500 startups since August 2012. As an investor, he also invested in a number of transnational companies, well-known businessman, blah, blah, blah. He went to Glenbrook South High School, got his degree out of the University of Madison, Wisconsin, received a bachelor's in psychology, and went over into IT work. Worked at one point in IT at Northwestern University. So he was a fairly successful entrepreneur, fairly successful. Now, I got to tell you, I'm sure you guys see these pictures here. I mean, it don't look to me like he's the sharpest tool in the shed. I mean, that is not the face of Einstein. All right. I mean, I'm a cat guy too, but this, I mean, he doesn't strike me as a particular genius, but nobody said you had to be a genius in order to be successful. All right. And he was fairly successful. He was part of Y Combinator. He moved to California where his startup, he was valued. He got a value before the Bitfinex and those 191,000 coins. His value was, $5-6 million. Then the Bitfinex, the stolen Bitcoins, his value pops up to $4.5 billion. And then he's arrested, and his value right now is whatever the monthly allowance is he's allowed to spend at the prison commissary. So rise and fall, brother, rise and fall. So that is Ilya. Ilya marries Heather Morgan. Turns out that Heather Morgan at one point was a writer for Forbes magazine. And she wrote about cybersecurity, of all things. Now, Ilya, web developer, entrepreneur, investor, supposedly mentor, all this other stuff. Technically experienced or has any high degree of technical expertise in cybercrime? Questionable. No real history of that whatsoever. No indication of that. He is motivated. Make no mistake, Ilya is absolutely motivated and has talked about that in interviews and with his, people he grew up with, motivated by cash. He always wanted to make money. But that doesn't mean you're a criminal just because you want to make money. Most people want to make money and they never resort to crime. All right. So that's Ilya. He marries Heather. Heather evidently at some point stops writing for Forbes and fancies herself a rapper. Razzle Khan or some bullshit like that is her name, her rap name. Now, is she a rapper? Well, maybe along the same lines that Baby Shark is high quality music. She's certainly not produced by Dr. Dre or any of those people. And I tried to listen to some of it last night, and it was entirely, you could not really stand any more than 4 or 5 seconds of that. And, you get some snapshots of what these, I call them kids. And it turns out I call everybody a kid that is not, my age. But it turns out that these kids, you look at them and I got to be honest with you, they do not look like criminal masterminds to me. They look to me like they suffer from FIS, what I like to call fucking idiot syndrome. And that syndrome is absolutely, it comes in and out of this episode a lot. So there's Razzle Khan. That is her name, Razzle Khan. There's Razzle Khan. There's the booking pictures. That looks like a man right there who he's had better days. And this looks like a girl right here who I don't know if she was on something or not, but it looks like maybe she just got popped from, doing some nefarious shit. So that's the second story. Ilya. I'm not horribly convinced that Ilya, while being a fairly successful entrepreneur, I'm not horribly convinced that he had any real technical expertise in crime at all. He certainly did not know how to launder money at all. He really screwed that up because he got indicted for trying to launder $4.5 billion in Bitcoin. Conspiracy to launder everything. They're looking at 25 years is what they're looking at. All right. They've got a hearing due September 30th. So that's what's going on there. Now, I need to tell you another story. See, this is a story in 3 parts. Think of it as maybe a Tarantino movie where, we're bouncing back around. We're telling 3 different stories and they all kind of intersect at the end because that's what happens. So here's the other story. Remember, the Secret Service gave me a job. Now, my job working for the Secret Service was to target individuals and build cases against them. My job was also as a consultant, teaching the Secret Service the dynamics of online fraud, how we operate, what we do, our mindsets, everything else. Training these people, because back then, federal law enforcement, they didn't know anything. They didn't know how to track people like me. They didn't understand the mindset. They didn't know anything at all about that. These days, they're much better versed, but back then, they really had no experience at all, and we were eating them alive. So they needed somebody to come in and do that. My name was Gollum Fun. I was top of the heap. I was that guy back then. So them having me was it was good for them. Of course, when I started to work for them, they let me sit in a county jail for 90 days before they got me out. When they got me out, I start breaking the law that night because my motivation was not to help them build cases against people. My motivation was to get back with my fiance, to try to save that relationship. And I had enough cognitive dissonance going on at that point in time that I believed the way to do that was to steal money and give her expensive crap. Idiot. Absolute idiot. You got me. So I start breaking the law day one, and I continue breaking the law from inside Secret Service offices for the next 10 months until they find out about it. And then the story goes from there. But it was a 10-month investigation. Part of my job was to build cases against individuals, and I built cases against at least 9 individuals. Now, the interesting thing that happens is there were several things, what I call misdeeds of the United States Secret Service during my tenure with them. The first thing is that, so the setup, I worked 4 to 6 hours a day inside Columbia, South Carolina Secret Service offices. They had me in this great big war room. They had me on a laptop hooked up to an outside line connected to a 50-inch plasma monitor mounted on the wall. Inside the room at all times were 2 Secret Service agents and a South Carolina law enforcement official. So 3 people in the room at all times. They had a desktop computer literally next to mine hooked up to an outside line. Their job was to monitor me, learn, oversee the investigation, everything else like that. A lot of my work was surfing websites, criminal forums, having conversations. So I would have maybe 20, 30 pages open at a time, bouncing back and forth between all of them, carrying on multiple conversations. I'm very good about what I do. For the first 2 weeks, they were very diligent in paying attention. Then they got bored, and the first misdeed is they started to watch pornography on their machine. And no, that's not a friendly euphemism. They watched porn. Their favorite site was called flashyourrack.com, where amateurs would show their breast, and then the viewer would rank their breast on a scale of 1 to 10. 1, don't like them. 10, I'll marry you today. And they spent a lot of time on that site and other pornographic sites as well, which I'm sitting there watching like, why not? I mean, they were recording everything that I was doing on Camtasia and Spectre Pro, taking snapshots and keylogging everything, but it went on a spindle at the end of the day. They weren't going to go through that. They weren't cataloging it any other way other than that. So I was like, shit, let's try it. So I start breaking the law from inside of those offices, and that continues for 10 months. So that was the first thing. The second thing that I call a major problem during that investigation, one day I'm leaving the offices, and the head agent at that point in time, my case actually had 2 Secret Service agents that were head agents. The head agent at that point in time, his name was Brad Smith. He gives me a call, gets me on the phone, and he says, "Hey, Brett, we've got a keylogger on our machine." I'm like, "What happened?" He said, "Well, La Cosa Nostra puts a keylogger on people's machines." And my question was, I was like, "Well, who put the keylogger on?" His response was, "None of your goddamn business." I'm like, okay, I'll take care of it when I get there tomorrow. Show up the next day in the offices. And at that point, I would just immediately go to my work area and start to work. Today wasn't like that. Today they had me waiting. That day they had me waiting in the waiting area. So Bobby Kirby comes out, and he was like, another agent. He comes out and he's like, he's talking to me. And I was like, "Bobby, I really need to know who runs that site." So he's like, "I'll ask Brad." So he goes around back in the back of the offices, and I hear Brad yell top of his lungs, tell him it's none of his goddamn business. So I'm like, okay. So they get me down to my work area, and I ask him, I was like, "What do you want me to do?" And they're like, well, what would you usually do in a situation like this? And my response was, well, I'd shut its ass down. And they were like, do what you'd usually do. So within 48 hours, the site's gone. La Cosa Nostra vanishes from the internet. Well, it turns out that La Cosa Nostra was ran by a cyber criminal that the Royal Canadian Police had gotten out of jail to run a honeypot to catch other cyber criminals. Secret Service knew that. They just didn't tell me. They didn't want me to know who was running it. So that prompted a call from Washington, basically asking the Columbia field office, what is your fucking monkey doing? And they come down. Washington tells them, we're flying down to see what's going on. Two agents come down, Brad and Bobby, and they look at me and said, you want to stay out of jail, don't you? And I'm like, yeah, well, then don't mention anything that we may have, told you to do this. This was all your idea. I'm like, understood. So Washington flies in, pulls the agents in. They talk to them, held 2 hours. Finally, they pull me in for all of 15 minutes and don't ask me anything about that. So that was the second instance. And none of that has anything to do with Ilya. What does have something to do with it is this third instance. So about 2 months into this 10-month investigation, we have an attacker who breaches our system. I walk into the office that day. I try to log into my computer. I do log into my laptop computer, and then I try to access an email address. I'm not able to sign into it. I'm like, it was a personal email address that I was using. So I try to sign into that, can't. I then try to reset the password. Turns out the security questions have been changed. As soon as I try to reset the password, I've got a burner phone sitting next to me that always stays at the office. As soon as I try to change the password on that burner phone starts to ring. Never happened before. It starts ringing. The agents are looking at me like, what the fuck? I pick up the phone, and on the other end of the line is a synthesized voice telling me that, hey, I've been hacked, I've been compromised, and they're going to publish every single thing that they know about me. Turns out that they didn't really know anything about me. They didn't know I was working for the Secret Service. They didn't know my real name. But the emails that they had access to, I had discussed Elizabeth, my fiance, and all the demons that she had went through and her problems and everything else. So this attacker proceeds to post that publicly on all the criminal forums. He posts my address because I had the address where the Secret Service was having me stay. He posts the address there in the hopes that someone will come and attack me. It gets so bad that the Secret Service, they make me change addresses because they were worried about my safety and my fiance's safety. That relationship basically ends because of that. All right. Ultimately, it ends because, well, mostly because of that. And the attacker keeps going. He contacts every day. He takes over email accounts. He steals e-gold, so he shuts those accounts down. And he taunts us every single day. One of the other things that he does is he also says that he has compromised a bank in Indiana to the tune of 200. He has compromised the servers, and he's gotten 200 accounts that he's trying to cash out. So we peg him for unauthorized access of a government computer, of aggravated identity theft, of access device fraud, of stolen PII. I mean, he's got a list of charges if we can identify this guy. And guess what? We do identify this guy. So there was a case built against 9 individuals plus this guy who had breached a Secret Service computer and had placed the keylogger, and who we had evidence had tried to cash out $500,000 of stolen bank accounts. Okay. Now there's a few problems. The first problem is that I was breaking the law from inside Secret Service offices. I was committing crimes on those computers. They found out about that after 10 months. They revoked my bond. I was only under state charges at that point in time. The state judge ruled that the Secret Service improperly revoked the bond. He lets me out of jail. As soon as he lets me out of jail, I take off on a cross-country crime spree, steal $600,000 in the space of 4 months, wind up on the United States Most Wanted list, go to Disney World, get arrested, sent to prison, escape. So their informant, me, Gollum Fun, was not a good witness at all. So they couldn't put me on the stand to testify against all these people that we had built cases against. That was problem number one. The second problem they had was we had an attacker who was in our system for 3 months. You see, he put the keylogger in. He stays there for 3 months. Day one, I'm telling these two agents, hey, we got a keylogger on a system. We need to format. It took them 3 months to do anything about it. So this guy was capturing all these data, all these keystrokes, taking over accounts and everything else for a 3-month span of time. After 3 months, I walk into the offices one day, and I think it was Brad that looks at me. He was like, we think there's a keylogger on your system. And my exact response was, no shit. And then they were like, well, we think you need to format. And I'm like, you think? So we formatted and finally got rid of the guy. But he was in there for 3 months. So here's the problem with that. It's very difficult to argue to a jury the nuances between having an attacker who simply has a keylogger on a system and is able to capture that data and an attacker who is in the system and able to manipulate evidence. You can't really explain the nuances of that to a jury and really convince them. It's very easy for a defense attorney to form a defense about that, saying, hey, you've already admitted an attacker did these things, and this attacker compromised bank accounts and everything else. You've already admitted to that. Who's to say he didn't manipulate data? It's very easy to plant that doubt in a jury's head. All right, so those were the two big problems. They're not going to put me on the stand. And then you've got this guy who had access to the computer that was collecting all of the evidence against these other 9 individuals. Turns out we identified who this guy was. This guy was a Russian. He was a Russian who had a kid in 1988. This guy's name, I want to be sure that I pronounce this properly. This guy's name was Yevgeny Lichtenstein, Russian spelling. He changes his name, he Americanizes it. He changes his name to Eugene Lichtenstein. He has a kid by the name of Ilya Lichtenstein. Eugene was an established cyber criminal. I'm going to read right now. This comes from Discovery on another gentleman's case. The way I got these documents, I built cases against 9 people. One of the people reached out to me while I was in Hawaii speaking on the behalf of AARP, and he gave me a lot of FOIA documents. Turns out the reason that they may not want me to have FOIA requests or the ability to file those, request those, is because I may be one of the only people on the planet that know what I'm looking at when I see some of these documents, in this case, for example. So here is the, it's called the Deuce Unredacted. And what happens is this guy, this attacker, he went by the screen name of Manus Dai, Hand of God, and then later Deuce. All right. He terrorized, because he didn't know any information on me, he continually terrorized this fiance of mine who had she didn't know I was a criminal until I got arrested. She never broke any law. She was overall a very good person. She just had some problems. She had some demons that she was trying to overcome. This guy takes advantage of that and posts it publicly for everyone to see and continues to post it and just hammer it away while terrorizing the agents, me, her, everybody else. Until we found out who he was. The agents go to interview the guy, and this is part of the investigative report against this guy. So, synopsis, and I'm reading directly. Actually, I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and share the screen so that we can all, and hopefully you guys can read this. I'm going to blow it up so maybe you can. So let's increase size. There we go. So synopsis, Yevgeny Lichtenstein obtained numerous bank account logins from First National Bank and Trust, Indiana, and has attempted to withdraw money from those accounts. The Indianapolis field office is requested to serve a grand jury subpoena on First National Bank and Trust to obtain information regarding those accounts. Details of the investigation. This is against Eugene Lichtenstein, the father of Ilya Lichtenstein. Details of the investigation. Reference is made to all previous reports in this case. CI 05001118. That's me. That's my CI number for the Secret Service. Has been in contact with Deuce, aka Yevgeny Lichtenstein, who claims to have hacked a server for First National Bank and Trust, Indiana. Lichtenstein explained that he was able to obtain over 200 accounts that contained certificates of deposit, applications, full account, and personal information was available to him. Deuce further stated that he is able to apply for online banking and telephone banking capabilities with this information. He claims to have done this with a few accounts. By doing this, he is able to order either a bill pay or an electronic funds transfer. Deuce requested CI, me, Gollum Fund, my assistance in determining how to withdraw the funds. Deuce provided the following username and password that he created to CI me to access. And he gives the login of Ronman 1933, password Fortuna1. Gollum Fund used the login and password provided by Deuce and accessed a checking account and CD account owned by, and there's the victim's name. I will try to blur that out post-production. The total value of the account accessed, $12,550. Gollum Fund stated that he would review the account and respond in a day as to whether or not money could be withdrawn from the account. All right. And you go on down through here through the report. It's unredacted, so it has the personal details of Eugene Lichtenstein as well. It's got his date of birth, his social. It's got every single thing about the guy. That's the first one. So we identified him. We built a case against him. They fly up to Chicago to interview him. And here is the redacted FOIA report that talks about Eugene. So starting on 8/29/2006, Special Agent Kirby and I, Brad Smith, interviewed Eugene Lichtenstein at the Chicago field office. Prior to the interview, Lichtenstein was advised that he was not under arrest and was free to leave at any time. Lichtenstein stated that he understood he was not in custody and voluntarily agreed to be interviewed. The following is a synopsis of that interview. Lichtenstein stated that he moved to the United States from Russia approximately 13 years ago. He further stated that he is fluent in the Russian language. Lichtenstein stated that he became interested in fraudulent schemes conducted over the internet in 2004. He further stated that his interest was directed toward advance fee or 419 schemes, and that he would attempt to gain access to the computers of the perpetrators of these types of crimes to warn potential victims. He further stated that he became interested in online carding forums, such as Shadow Crew and theft services, with the intent which was to warn potential victims of these types of crimes. Lichtenstein further stated that he installed a keylogger on the system used by Gollum Fund. With this keylogger, he stated he took control of email accounts. In addition, that he posted personal information obtained from emails on the FedWatch group. Lichtenstein stated that he initially wanted to expose Gollum Fund, but later attempted to obtain money from several compromised accounts from a bank in Indiana with Gollum Fund's assistance. Eugene Lichtenstein stated that he was unsuccessful in obtaining fraudulent funds from these compromised accounts, stated that he would cooperate in furtherance of the Secret Service investigation, admitted he was a subject who used the screen names of Deus Manus Dei and Deuce when communicating online with Johnson/Gollum Fund and other subjects. Therefore, Eugene Lichtenstein has been eliminated as a suspect in this investigation. So they built the case again, and here's what I know for a fact, all right? The United States Secret Service had a hard-on for this guy. They were really upset that he had done this, that he had accessed the government computer, that he had terrorized everybody on that system that he had stolen bank accounts and they were out to get him. There was no doubt about it. They wanted him. Hell, I wanted him because he would terrorize my fiance. I wanted him to. And I told him back then, I'm going to get you. At some point, I'm going to get you. They didn't prosecute him. Why? The reason they didn't prosecute him is because had they prosecuted him, he would have been on the stand. His case would have been public at that point. The breach of the United States Secret Service would have been exposed at that point, and those other at least 9 individuals who had been indicted because of my cooperation and the cases that I had helped build against them, because of that, those other 9 individuals would have been informed that, hey, there was an attacker on the machine for a space of 3 months. It would have been very easy at that point for their defense attorney to potentially place that one small doubt in a jury's mind that, hey, maybe this attacker also planted evidence. I mean, it's not unreasonable because you're not dealing with a sophisticated jury, a technical jury. You're dealing with people back then who had no idea about the internet. Realize this is 2004, 2005, 2006 in this case. So they had no idea. So what happens is they don't prosecute. That way it doesn't have to be made public. That way the other 9 defendants on these cases don't have all the information of everything that happened during their trials. Not trials in these cases. Most of them took plea agreements. So they were never given all the information they needed to make a proper decision and to form a proper defense against them. Now, I want to say something without a shadow of a doubt. All 9 of these people were guilty. They were guilty of what they were charged with and more. Me, I was absolutely guilty. I'm lucky. I am damn lucky to get off with simply 7.5 years in prison. Damn lucky. I should have got 20. All right. I'm very fortunate. I'm very blessed. And I'm going to tell you, it bothers me to no end to have to talk about this against the United States Secret Service, because these days I respect law enforcement. I love the hell out of them. Turns out that when you stop breaking the law enforcement stops being assholes. But I'm the guy that believes, too, it's about doing the right damn thing. I'm the guy that I'm feeling a lot of guilt because I'm the guy that set up these 9 people and led them to the slaughter. And then Secret Service agents decided not to play fair. They chose to prosecute 9 unsafe cases instead of the one safe case, is what happened. So is that the only story of the day? No, that's not the only story of the day. Ilya Lichtenstein was an established cyber criminal. Today, he is a mortgage broker in Chicago. And he had experience. That attack, that was not his first rodeo. You could tell he had done this stuff before. He had expertise. You don't go and compromise a bank's servers just on a whim. You've got to have experience to do that. He was an experienced cyber criminal. That line that he fed the Secret Service of, oh, well, I'm all about exposing the hackers and the criminals. Well, that works just fine until you read a little bit further down that he had also compromised a bank's servers and had access to 200 bank accounts, and he was trying to cash them out. That ship don't float. That dog don't hunt. That don't work. That's a lie. And they knew it. They knew it. They chose not to prosecute so they wouldn't have to have that discussion and thereby endanger the other 9 investigations that were going on. That's what happened. The interesting thing is this, I'm going to call him Jeffrey. Jeffrey, who I built a case, he was one of the 9, not his real name. He was one of the 9. He reaches out to me while I was in Hawaii, and he starts giving me these documents and talking about this. Hey, I'll share it because I got RSA, Ridley Scott's film companies, making a docudrama about me. I asked him if he had any information. So he said, I'll give you all this stuff. I'm like, all right. So he sends me these documents. He didn't know what the hell the documents were, but I've got that lifetime FOIA ban. As soon as I see it, I'm like, shit, I know what this is. Ilya. So I've got guilt that's going on about that. And I've got all these questions because here's something else that I know. So the FBI arrested Ilya Lichtenstein. I know that the Secret Service and the FBI, they don't share information. So the only people that knew that Eugene Lichtenstein was an established cyber criminal was the Secret Service. Those FBI agents that arrested Ilya, they don't know that until they listen to this show today. And that's a fact. So certainly that was going on. This kid that reached out to me that I put behind bars, 2007, he makes a FOIA request. He wants all the information he can get about this. Because I had written this kid, before I escaped from prison, I wrote this kid a letter saying, hey, this is the stuff that you need to know about the case. And I talked about the porn, talked about the RCMP investigation, talked about the hack, talked about how agents had backdated monthly reports, altered them, things like that. So he makes a FOIA request wanting all that information, makes it in 2007. I also wrote the judge of my case a 17-page horrible letter. You talk about cognitive dissonance. Boy, I was full of it back then. I was blaming everybody but me about the crimes I had committed. It took me a long time to come to terms with that. But I wrote her a 17-page letter detailing the exact same thing. So even though I had the cognitive dissonance, I was telling the truth about what happened in the investigations. So Jeffrey, we're calling him Jeffrey, makes the FOIA request 2007. He goes to prison, gets out of prison. He doesn't get the FOIA documents until 2014 after everything's done. He gets thousands of pages. They send it to him hard copy. He's got the papers. All right. 2019, he decides he wants a virtual copy of that. He makes the same FOIA request. He gets 60 pages. All the documents that I've referenced today and shown you and everything, gone, deleted, destroyed. Everything that talks about Eugene Lichtenstein, all that, no longer exists. They were supposed to keep those documents for 30 years. 30 years. But much like the January 6th text messages that the Secret Service deleted, same thing with these documents. Gone. Just do the right damn thing. Somebody's got to say the stuff. Somebody's got to say the shit that needs to be said. So I've been going through this. You know, I'm not, it's not like, certainly there's a sense of righteousness about me when it comes to talking about Eugene, because, you know, he did that. My fiance was a victim and I took that personal. Certainly that's part of it, but that's more icing on the cake because my focus is doing the right thing. I don't, it's hard for me to talk against law enforcement because I had lunch with Agent Bobby Kirby after the RCMP thing. Brad Smith is kind of dismissed as the head agent in charge of me, and Bobby Kirby gets the position. And I screwed him over. I absolutely screwed him over. Both those agents were, my understanding, both those agents were fired. Looks like Brad Smith is still with the Secret Service. Bobby ends up having a lateral transfer. But what happens, I have lunch with Bobby, and I was able to apologize to the guy for screwing him over. And I meant that. I mean that today. I mean that today. I was sorry about doing that. And I am sorry about doing that. And the guy, he broke my heart. He told me that I told him I was trying to be a good guy, a better guy than I was. And he looked at me and said, Brett, you were always a good guy. You just didn't know it at that time. So I want you guys to know that these guys, I think they're good guys. I do. But I think they were so adamant about getting these convictions that they chose, because they knew the guys were guilty. Absolutely, they knew the guys were guilty. They chose to prosecute those 9 convictions and let this one son of a bitch go where they knew they had him nailed to the wall in order to prosecute those other 9 guys and deny them the information that they needed to form a proper defense, to make an educated choice on whether to take a plea agreement or take it to trial. That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. Justice is even when you know someone is guilty, that you do the right thing. You are not judge and jury. You're not. Do the right thing. Do your job. You got one job. You got one job. Do your job. Guys would have probably been convicted anyway. Do your job. But no, you were so scared of that you let that guy go so that doesn't come to any evidence. The problem was, I wrote the letter to the judge. I wrote the letter to Jeffrey, and it starts to come out. Jeffrey gets these FOIA documents. Then he later finds out that, hey, anything that mentioned that, it accidentally got destroyed. Yeah, we didn't mean to. We know we were supposed to keep it for 30 years, but it ain't around no more. Too bad I got a copy of it. So I've got questions about those 9 because I feel a lot of guilt about that. Yeah, they committed the crimes, but I still feel guilt about I led them to these prosecutions where they did not get a fair trial. And it's important that we're fair in these things because it starts out where you know the guy's guilty and you just kind of, shove something under the rug in order to put this guy in prison. He deserves prison, absolutely. So it starts out that way. Then the next time it starts out, well, I think he's guilty and he's an asshole, so let me do this again. And then finally it gets to the point where I just don't like this guy. I just don't like the color of this guy, the way this guy looks. That's the way the story ends. So justice has to be fair regardless across the board, and justice was not fair in this case. That's one point that I'm upset about. The other point is Ilya, because I identify with Ilya Lichtenstein. I grew up in that environment. My mom was a criminal, and I became a criminal. And I'm wondering, because I know that Ilya knew his dad did this. I know that. I know that when the Secret Service went to interview Eugene Lichtenstein, they either showed up at his work or they knocked at his door and threw him off balance at that point. That was their technique back then. You do it in front of people that they know, throws them off balance, they start to blab all of a sudden, catch them off guard. So Ilya absolutely knew his father was a cyber criminal. In fact, some of the IPs that we got from Eugene came from Northwestern, where I think Eugene's wife worked at Northwestern at that point in time. And I think maybe, come to find out, Ilya had an IT job at one point working out of Northwestern. So Ilya absolutely knew who his dad was, and his dad was a criminal. Not a doubt in my mind about that. My question, the second big question I've got is, would Ilya have committed this crime if his dad had been prosecuted? Would he have tried to launder out $4.5 billion worth of Bitcoin? And I got to tell you, I identify with that. I'm like, if someone would have intervened when I was a child and put some of those people, the adults in my circle, in prison, things may have turned out a little different for me. Maybe not. But I can't help but to think that might be the case, have been the case with Ilya. You look at the kid, he's a fucking idiot, all right? But I think he's an innocent enough. I mean, I think he tried to launder money, but I think at heart he might be a good guy. You can be a criminal and still be a good guy. That's the lesson for the day. You can be a criminal and still be a good guy. Third question I've got is, did Ilya act alone? Because I'm not the least bit convinced that Ilya had the criminal expertise to do anything. Certainly, he shows absolutely no expertise when it comes to trying to launder money. I'm not convinced he had the expertise at all to do this crime. But it turns out there was at least one family member who absolutely had the expertise to commit that crime. And I'll note that Ilya's not been charged with the actual theft. He's just been charged with money laundering. So absolutely, there was one person there that had the skill to do it, the demonstrated skill that the Secret Service was well aware of, that they didn't divulge to the FBI when the FBI arrested Ilya and his wife, Heather Morgan. So these are the questions that are going through my head. And I think there's serious questions that need to be answered. And I reached out to Forbes, and I had a talk with a reporter there. I've been talking today to the reporter. I've got the film crew that's filming. And they were interested enough in it that they decided, hey, I'm going to be in the documentary as well, because this is stuff that has never been divulged. This is stuff that was covered up. Think about how this investigation would have changed if, when they arrested Ilya, they knew his dad was a cyber criminal, and a big one. Now he's a mortgage broker in Chicago. And hey, supposition, complete hypothesizing, but stereotypically, a mortgage broker in Chicago with Russian origins. Ha! I say that because I've also talked to enough people over the past 2 to 3 days that have been asking questions about this investigation, this crime. And there's a whole lot of people that have said they are too scared to talk about it at all, on the record, off the record, anything else. Ilya doesn't look the least bit dangerous to me, but I'm wondering if there might be some sort of organized connections, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, from elsewhere that's involved in that. And I'm going to tell you, my feelings on that is absolutely yes. So that's today's show. It's a show about people who didn't do the right damn thing. Whether that be Eugene, whether that be me, those 9 guys that didn't get proper defenses, Ilya, Heather Morgan, United States Secret Service. It's about people who didn't do the right damn thing. And it's about what would have happened if the right thing would have been done. You had one job. You had one job, and that was simply to do the right thing. Hell, that's what they hired you for, was to do the right thing. That's what they hired you for. That's your position. You got a position of trust. And it's, I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's a goddamn shame that I'm the guy that calls it out, knowing that I used to be that criminal. It's a damn shame that I'm the guy that's calling it out. To Eugene, I don't know what your involvement is at all. I don't care. I don't care. I know that this is probably going to affect Ilya's sentencing in the case, because obviously the prosecutors don't know it. FBI agents who arrested the guy don't know it. Defense doesn't know it, because Ilya's probably, believe you me, I'm well aware of that Russian mindset. You guys don't blab. You don't snitch. You don't rat. So I'm sure that Ilya's set his scared ass right where it is and hasn't said a word about your history. But I got you, you son of a bitch. My hope right now is that the truth comes out, whatever that truth is. I don't know if you're involved or not. Don't care. But I know that there's going to be more people that are talking about this over the next few days. My hope is that some of those people that are scared to death to talk and tell the truth of the matter, my hope is that they come out and they start talking. My hope is that the endemic problems, the systemic problems in law enforcement, where stuff like this happens, that we can get in that conversation. We can somehow make a difference. That somehow, maybe me and maybe other people who are willing to speak up, causes some sort of change where we see justice enacted fairly. That we don't see cops that are just so anxious to get a guy because they know that they're guilty, decide that they're not going to, give complete information about a case out and not prosecute some son of a bitch that needs to be prosecuted. That's my hope. Time to end this show. What do we say? We say stay safe, stay secure, and stay vigilant. More importantly, this is the Brett Johnson Show. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the truth. And at the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. My name is Brett Johnson. I'm a former criminal. Now I'm a good guy. Thank you for listening. Until next time.